The year-end party was held in the Tangyue Tech Ballroom. Gold and silver streamers hung from the ceiling, and the air smelled like expensive champagne. I stood at the back near the fire exit, holding a half-empty glass that nobody had bothered to refill. Shen Ruotang stood on stage under a spotlight. She wore a fitted black dress and red-soled heels that clicked every time she moved. A massive screen behind her showed the numbers everyone had been whispering about all quarter.
Annual revenue, 400 million.
Net profit, 200 million. She smiled into the microphone and said, "Tangyue Tech has achieved the impossible, and I want to thank every single person in this room." The room erupted in applause. People around me clapped so hard, their hands turned red. I clapped too, like an idiot, because I was still dumb enough to believe some of that gratitude might land on me.
200 million in profit.
I knew exactly where that number came from. The Nebula system was my brainchild. Every line of its core architecture, every security protocol, every machine learning module that had left our competitors bleeding. I had built it in a cramped cubicle over 3 years while the rest of the company went home to their families. It worked through her birthdays, through our anniversary dinners, through nights when my eyes burned so badly I had to splash cold water on my face just to see the screen.
Shen Ruotang was my wife.
On paper, anyway. In public, I was just the quiet guy from the tech department who never got invited to client dinners. She started calling names.
One by one, employees walked up to the stage to receive their bonuses.
The head of sales got a luxury SUV. The marketing director received a check for 800,000. Even the junior front-end developer who had joined 6 months ago got an envelope thick enough to make him stumble on his way down the steps. My name never came. I wasn't surprised. After 3 years of marriage and 4 years of working under her, I had learned not to expect applause. What I hadn't learned was when to stop hoping. Then Shen Ruotang looked directly at me. Her eyes flicked over my wrinkled dress shirt and the coffee stain on my sleeve. Her smile didn't waver, but something sharp curled at the corner of her mouth. She said, "We have one final award. This one goes to the most dedicated member of our technical staff. Has been with Tangyue since the beginning. He never complains. He never asks for anything. Let's give him the recognition he truly deserves." My husband, Lu Yanzhou. A few people snickered. My face went hot. I walked toward the stage, and the crowd parted like I was carrying something contagious. Shen Ruotang waited with her hands behind her back. When I stopped in front of her, she brought her hands forward. 2 rolls of toilet paper. Plain white generic brand, the kind you'd find in a public restroom. She tossed 1 roll at me. It hit my chest and dropped. I caught the second one by reflex, and the crowd burst into laughter. Shen Ruotang said into the microphone, her voice dripping with honey, "Yanzhou, you've been wiping up everyone's messes all year. I figured you deserved something you could actually use. Congratulations." She applauded, slow and deliberate. The room followed. The sound of 300 people clapping for 2 rolls of toilet paper filled the ballroom like a twisted standing ovation. I stood there, holding cheap tissue in my hands, feeling something inside my chest snap so quietly that I didn't even hear it. I just felt the pieces. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the toilet paper back at her. I just nodded, tucked the rolls under my arm, and walked off the stage. Behind me, Shen Ruotang said, "Everyone enjoy the open bar. Yanzhou, my office." 10 minutes. Her office smelled like jasmine and leather. She sat behind her desk with her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there. I stood near the door and said, "You wanted to see me." She didn't look up. The Nebula 3.0 patch. The client moved up the deadline. I need it complete and fully tested by 9 in the morning. No excuses. "That's a 12-hour overhaul," I said. "It needs at least 3 developers and a full QA cycle." Now she looked up. Her gaze was flat and cold, the way you look at a vending machine that swallowed your dollar. She said, "Then you'd better start now. Unless you want next year's bonus to be a single roll." She pulled a bank card from her drawer and slid it across the desk. It stopped at the edge right above my shoes.
5,000, she said.
"Your living expenses for the month. Try not to blow it all on instant noodles. You know how I feel about clutter in the kitchen?" I picked up the card. The plastic felt heavier than it should have.
5,000 yuan.
Less than what the interns made. I said, "Anything else?" "Close the door on your way out," she said, already looking back at her phone. "And try not to look so pathetic tonight. It's bad for morale." I walked out and closed the door so gently, the latch didn't even click. Back at my cubicle, the office was dark and empty. Everyone else had gone to celebrate. I sat in front of my 3 monitors and stared at the Nebula codebase spread across the screens. Every file, every module, every clever line I had written while she slept in our bed alone. I opened a secure terminal, My fingers moved without hesitation. Within 15 minutes, the entire core architecture began cloning itself onto a private offshore server I had prepared months earlier.
Just in case.
Just for moments like this. The copy ran quietly in the background. The original code on the company server remained untouched.
For now.
Then I built the patch she had demanded. A beautiful hollow patch that would pass tomorrow's demo with flying colors, but carried a gift buried deep in its bones. A dormant flaw that only I understood. A fuse waiting for a match. The office clock ticked past 1 in the morning. I saved my work, logged off, and stood up. The 2 rolls of toilet paper were still on my desk. I stuffed them into my coat pockets and walked to the elevator. In the mirrored walls of the elevator, I saw a man with bloodshot eyes and a coffee stain on his collar. A man everyone in that building thought was a joke. I pressed B2, the underground garage. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. I just wanted to get in my rusty sedan and drive home to the empty apartment that still, stupidly, had her toothbrush next to mine. The elevator doors opened. The garage was cold and smelled like wet concrete and exhaust fumes. I walked past rows of luxury cars, all leased through company accounts, all paid for by the systems running on my code. And then I stopped because Shen Ruotang's Porsche Cayenne was still parked in her reserved spot. The windows were fogged. The engine was off, but the interior light was on. And inside, 2 silhouettes were tangled together in a kiss so deep it looked like they were trying to crawl into each other's skin. The concrete pillar I hid behind was cold against my back, but I didn't feel it. I could only stare at that fogged-up Porsche window and the shapes moving behind the glass. Shen Ruotang's silhouette was unmistakable. I had memorized the way she tilted her head years ago, back when she still let me kiss her. Now that same head was tilted for another man. His hand was pressed against the back of her neck. Her fingers were tangled in his collar. I took out my phone. My hands were steady, steadier than they had been all night. I opened the camera app and started recording. The window was cracked open just enough for their voices to spill out. Shen Ruotang laughed and said, "You're impossible." The man's voice was low and smug.
And you're married.
Yet here we are.
Married doesn't mean anything, she said.
You know what he got tonight?
2 rolls of toilet paper. I threw them at him in front of the whole company. He just stood there and took it.
God, he's so pathetic.
The man chuckled. Does he at least make good money?
He makes fortunes, Shen Ruotang said. He just never sees a cent of it.
Watch.
She pulled a sleek black card from her purse and waved it in front of his face. The dim garage light caught the embossed logo.
Tang Yue Tech Corporate Elite.
Unlimited credit line, tied directly to the company's main operating account. The account that overflowed with the revenue my systems generated. 200 million in profit this year, she said. And every yuan goes straight through my fingers. He gets 5,000 a month for pocket money and never even asks where the rest disappears. I could buy a building tonight and he'd just ask if I needed him to carry the bags. The man took the card from her hand and kissed it like it was her mouth. Then tonight, you're paying. The Peninsula Hotel, penthouse suite, 20,000 yuan champagne. Book it, Shen Ruotang said. Charge everything to the account.
Let him earn it back tomorrow while he's sleeping under his desk.
They kissed again. Longer this time. Deeper. I stopped recording. The video file sat in my phone like a live grenade. I slipped the device back into my pocket and pressed my forehead against the cold pillar. 3 years of marriage. 4 years of building her company from nothing. I had given up a research fellowship at a top institute to help her launch Tang Yue Tech. I had pulled all-nighters when she had migraines. I had eaten convenience store rice balls for dinner so she could take clients to Michelin-starred restaurants. I had written code until my wrists ached and my vision blurred. And she gave me toilet paper. And she gave that man the Peninsula Hotel. I could have walked over and banged on the window. I could have screamed until security came. I could have made a scene so ugly it would have followed her for years. But that wasn't the kind of man I was anymore. The old Lu Yanzhou would have just gone home and cried into a pillow. The new one, the one born 15 minutes ago during a standing ovation for 2 rolls of toilet paper, had different plans. I backed away from the pillar and walked silently to my car, an old silver sedan with a dented door and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. I sat in the driver's seat and watched the Porsche until its engine rumbled to life. The headlights swept across the garage. The car pulled out and disappeared up the exit ramp, heading toward the Peninsula Hotel and 20,000 yuan champagne. I drove home alone. Our apartment was on the 15th floor of a glass tower in the financial district. Shen Ruotang had bought it last year with cash from the company account. Shed chosen the furniture. Shed chosen the view. I just lived there. I walked through the dark living room and into the small study Shed let me keep. My computers were set up on a cheap desk I had brought from my old dorm. On the wall was our wedding photo. She looked radiant. I looked grateful. Looking at it now made me want to vomit. I sat down and powered on my rig.
3 screens flickered to life.
I opened the encrypted drive where the full Nebula core now lived, safe and sound on a server she would never find. The copy was complete. Every algorithm, every proprietary module, every piece of the technical foundation that Tang Yui Tech stood on. The original still sat on company servers, humming along like nothing was wrong. I wasn't going to pull the plug tonight. That would be too quick. Too clean. Shen Ruotang didn't deserve clean. She deserved a slow-motion disaster she could watch frame by frame. I set up a dead man switch on the core code, a time-delayed trigger that would activate if I didn't check in every 24 hours. If anything happened to me, if she tried to lock me out, the entire Nebula system would corrupt itself from the inside.
Not a crash.
A slow, beautiful, irreversible rot. Then I pulled a sticky note from my drawer and wrote 2 words.
No more.
I stuck it to the wedding photo, right over her smile. The clock on my screen read 3 in the morning. I set an alarm for 7. I'd show up at the office on time, freshly showered, wearing a clean shirt. I'd smile at the receptionist. I'd deliver the patch I had built.
I'd watch Shen Ruotang take all the credit in front of the client.
And I'd wait.
Because the woman who had just spent my life's work on a penthouse suite and a man who wasn't her husband was about to learn something the hard way. You can humiliate a man who loves you for years and he might just swallow it. You can use his money to buy hotel rooms for another man, and he might even film it for you. But when you hand him 2 rolls of toilet paper and call it a bonus, you better make sure he's not the one holding the only copy of everything you've built. The sun hadn't risen yet, but I could already feel it. Somewhere on the other side of the city, Shen Ruotang was drinking champagne and laughing at the fool she'd married. She didn't know that the fool had just become the most dangerous man in her world. 3 days passed after the parking garage. I showed up to work on time every morning. I wore clean shirts. I smiled at the receptionist. I delivered the patch for Nebula 3.0 in front of a room full of clients. And Shen Ruotang stood beside me taking every compliment like she had written the code herself. I didn't flinch. I just watched her lie with perfect teeth and thought about 20,000 yuan champagne. Then Thursday evening came, and the last straw landed. I was at my cubicle packing up to leave when my phone buzzed. Shen Ruotang's name flashed on the screen, along with a message that read, "My office." Now, her office door was open when I arrived. She stood by the window with her back to me, phone pressed to her ear, her voice honey-sweet in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in years. She said into the phone, "I'll be there by 8. Book the private room. You know the one? Don't be late." She laughed, low and warm, then hung up and turned to face me. Her expression shifted the moment she saw me. The warmth vanished. What was left was the cold, efficient mask of a CEO addressing a disposable tool. She said, "Rui Fong Group just called. They want a fully interactive real-time analytics dashboard added to the proposal. The demo is at 9 tomorrow morning."
You'll need to build it tonight?
I said that's at least a week of development. UI framework, data pipeline integration, stress testing. It can't be done overnight. She walked to her desk and started packing her handbag. She didn't even look up. She said, "That sounds like your problem, not mine."
You've pulled all-nighters before.
One more won't kill you. Just get it done.
"Ruotang," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended.
This isn't reasonable.
She snapped her bag shut and finally met my eyes. Her gaze was bored, almost curious, like she was examining a bug under glass. She said, "Reasonable doesn't pay your living expenses. Reasonable doesn't keep a roof over your head." "I do. So go to your desk, write the code, and don't come out until the demo is ready. I have an important dinner with a potential investor. Don't call me unless the building is on fire." She walked past me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. At the door, she paused and looked over her shoulder. "And Yanzhou," she said, "if the client isn't impressed tomorrow, you'll have more to worry about than a missed night of sleep. Understand?" She didn't wait for an answer. She just walked out. I watched through the glass walls as she headed for the elevator, her phone already pressed to her ear again, her laugh echoing down the corridor.
An important dinner with a potential investor.
Sure. I had seen the message flash on her screen when she stood by the window. Peninsula private room. Same as last time. No investor name. Just a heart emoji. She was going to see him again. The man from the Porsche. The man who kissed her black card like it was her lips. and she wanted me to spend the night alone in a cubicle building a dashboard so she could impress a client while her boyfriend poured her champagne with my money. I walked back to my cubicle. The floor was empty. Every desk was dark. Outside the window, the city was a sea of lights, millions of people living their lives while I stood in a glass tower, making billionaires richer. I sat down.
I woke up my monitors.
The Ruotang project files sat in a folder on the company server, waiting for me to perform my miracle. Instead, I opened a terminal window. My fingers rested on the keyboard. I thought about the wedding photo on my study wall. I thought about the 2 rolls of toilet paper hitting my chest. I thought about fogged Porsche windows and penthouse suites and the sound of her laugh when she told another man how pathetic I was.
Then I smiled.
I typed the first command, a simple authentication override using the backdoor I had built into the system 3 years ago.
Her IT team had never found it. They never even looked.
The command line blinked green. Access granted. Root privileges. I pulled up the company's core repository, the beating heart of Tangyue Tech. Every algorithm, every module, every line of proprietary code that powered Nebula, that powered the client portals, that powered the billing systems, that powered everything. 4 years of my life, sitting in tidy folders on a server I knew better than my own apartment. I selected the entire core directory. 1 click. Everything highlighted in blue. Then I wrote a script, a beautiful, elegant little script that would overwrite every file with empty shells. The folder structure would remain intact. The file names would stay the same. To a casual glance, nothing would look missing. But when any system tried to actually run the code, it would find nothing but blank space and a single line of text repeated in every file. Thank you for your patronage. I set the script to execute at 2 in the morning. By then, I would be long gone, and Shen Ruotang would still be tangled in hotel sheets with a man whose name I didn't even want to know. But before that, I had one more thing to do. I opened a document on my personal laptop, typed 4 sentences and printed 2 copies. Then I stood up, walked to Shen Ruotang's office and slid 1 copy under her keyboard. The other I folded into my pocket. Back at my cubicle, I took one last look at the screens that had been my whole world. The desk I had slept under, the chair that had worn a permanent dent from my back, the coffee mug with a chip in the rim.
I logged out.
I shut down the machines. I picked up my bag and walked to the elevator without looking back. The ride down to the lobby was silent. The security guard at the front desk gave me a nod. I nodded back. Just another late-night worker going home. Nothing to see. I drove back to the apartment on the 15th floor. The lights were off. The air was stale. I walked into the study and stood in front of the wedding photo. Her smile. My grateful face. I pulled the second copy of my resignation letter from my pocket and placed it on the desk, right next to the photo. It read, "Effective immediately. I resign from Tangyue Tech.
The Nebula core repository has been sanitized for your convenience.
Consider it my final contribution to a company that values me exactly as much as 2 rolls of toilet paper."
Don't bother calling.
I didn't pack much. A duffel bag with clothes, my personal laptop, my external drives, and a few books. I left everything else, the furniture she had chosen, the kitchen I had never been allowed to cook in, the bed I had slept in alone for 3 years. I walked out the front door and didn't lock it. Let her come home to an open door and an empty closet. Let her figure it out. The rental apartment I had found 2 days earlier was in the old part of the city, a tiny studio on the 6th floor of a building with no elevator. The walls were thin. The faucet dripped. The bed was a mattress on the floor. It was perfect. I dropped my bag by the door, sat on the mattress, and opened my laptop. The private server was still running. The full Nebula core sat safe and untouched in its encrypted vault. The dead man's switch was active. The dormant flaw I had buried in the patch was sleeping like a seed in frozen ground. Everything was in place. The clock on my screen ticked past 1 in the morning. In another hour, my script would fire, and Tangyue Tech would become a hollow shell.
By 9 in the morning, when the Ruifeng demo was supposed to happen, every system in the company would be dead.
I lay back on the thin mattress and stared at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere across the city, Shen Ruotang was probably laughing into a champagne glass right now, toasting to her brilliant career and her obedient husband, who would never dare say no. She was about to wake up in a world where every line of code she had ever sold was gone, and I was going to sleep better than I had in years. Shen Ruotang's morning began with a kiss on the forehead from a man who was already reaching for his watch. She stretched in the hotel bed, the silk sheets sliding off her shoulders, and checked her phone.
No messages from Lu Yanzhou. No frantic emails about the Ruifeng demo.
She assumed that meant he had done his job, like he always did. She smiled and ordered room service. By 8:30 she was in her Porsche, merging onto the elevated highway with a latte in the cup holder and the Ruifeng proposal fresh on her mind. The dashboard would be ready.
Lu Yanzhou never missed a deadline.
He was reliable like a toaster.
You pressed the button and bread came out. She didn't think about him beyond that. At 8:45, her phone rang. The caller ID said Chen Wei, her head of IT operations. She let it go to voicemail, probably some minor server issue. Chen Wei always panicked over nothing. At 8:47, Chen Wei called again. Then again at 8:48. At 8:49, the head of client services called. Then the legal department.
Shen Ruotang frowned and answered.
She said, "What is it?"
In 5 minutes from the office, Chen Wei's voice was shaking.
Ms.
Shen, something's happened.
The servers.
All of them.
They're gone. Shen Ruotang said, "What do you mean gone? Be specific."
I mean the code, miss.
Shen,
The entire Nebula Core repository. Every server, every backup, every redundant copy. Every single file has been overwritten. It's just empty shells. All of it. She nearly swerved into the next lane. Horns blared around her.
She said, "That's impossible."
Restore from the off-site backup. There's no off-site backup that's current. The automated backup system was... It was copying the overwritten files. The original data is gone. The only thing left in every single file is one sentence. Thank you for your patronage. The words hit her like a slap.
Patronage.
The toilet paper.
Lu Yanzhou.
She said, her voice dropping to ice. Lock down his accounts.
All of them.
Immediately.
We tried.
He deleted his credentials before he left. We can't even find his access logs. It's like he was never in the system. Shen Ruotang ended the call and pressed the accelerator hard. The Porsche shot through traffic.
Her mind was racing faster than the car.
He wouldn't. He couldn't. Lu Yanzhou was a doormat. He was the man who said thank you when she handed him toilet paper in front of 300 people. He didn't have this in him. She burst into the Tangyue Tech lobby at 9:05. The receptionist's face was pale. People were running down the corridors carrying laptops like the building was on fire. The air was thick with the sound of ringing phones and panicked voices. Chen Wei met her at the elevator. He was a short, balding man in his 40s, and right now he looked 20 years older. He said, "Every client system that runs on Nebula just went dark. I'm talking about 47 companies. Logistics portals, payment processors, customer management dashboards. All of them just stopped." Shen Ruotang said, "How long to rebuild from scratch?" Chen Wei stared at her, like she had asked him to fly to the moon.
He said rebuild?
Ms. Shen, the Nebula Core took a team of engineers 4 years to develop. The architecture is so tightly integrated with our client's infrastructure that nobody even knows where all the connection points are.
Except.
He stopped.
He didn't need to finish the sentence. Except Lu Yanzhou. Shen Ruotang walked into the main operations room. The big screens on the wall, which usually displayed real-time revenue streams and system health metrics, were all showing the same thing. Red error messages.
White text on black backgrounds.
Critical failure. Connection lost. Core module not found. In the corner, a junior developer was on the phone with a client, his voice cracking as he said, "No sir, we don't have an estimated restoration time. Yes, I understand you're losing 200,000 per hour. Yes, we are aware. Please hold." The client services manager, a woman named Lin Yao, rushed over with a tablet in her hand.
She said, "Ms.
Shen, 11 clients have already filed breach of contract claims.
4 more are threatening to sue before noon.
Ruifeng Group just called and canceled the demo. They said if we don't restore service by 3 this afternoon, they're pulling their entire 5-year contract and demanding full compensation. Shen Ruotang didn't answer. She turned and walked to her office. On her desk, under her keyboard, was a single sheet of paper. The resignation letter. She read it once. Then again, her knuckles turned white around the edge of the paper. She grabbed her phone and dialed Lu Yanzhou's number. The call didn't even ring. Straight to voicemail.
She dialed again.
Same result. She tried a third time. This time, a robotic voice said, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She threw the phone against the wall. It shattered and left a dent in the drywall. Her assistant knocked on the door and stepped inside, carefully, like she was approaching a wounded animal. The assistant said, "Ms.
Shen, the board of directors is requesting an emergency conference call."
They've seen the stock price. It's down 18% in pre-market trading. 18% before the market had even officially opened, before the news had fully spread. By the time the closing bell rang, Tang Yue Tech would be hemorrhaging value faster than she could calculate. Shen Ruotang sat down in her leather chair. For the first time in 4 years, she didn't know what to do. She had built this company from a tiny startup into an industry leader. She had crushed competitors, charmed investors, negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions. She had never lost a fight she cared about. But this wasn't a competitor. This wasn't a market downturn.
This was her husband.
The man she had mocked in front of the entire company. The man she had handed toilet paper to, while her boyfriend waited in a Porsche downstairs.
She sent someone to the apartment.
They came back 20 minutes later with news she already feared. The door was unlocked. The closet was half empty. Her husband was gone, and the only thing he had left behind was a second copy of the resignation letter and their wedding photo with a sticky note on it. 2 words, no more. The operations room was chaos when she returned. Every phone line was lit up. Chen Wei's team was huddled around monitors, trying desperately to find a backup that didn't exist. Lin Yao was on a video call with a client, who was screaming so loudly his voice carried through the entire floor. Shen Ruotang stood in the middle of it all and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. It started in her chest and spread outward like cold water filling her veins. Fear. Real undiluted fear. She had spent years treating Lu Yanzhou like he was nothing, a ghost in his own marriage, a pair of hands that typed code while she lived her life. She had forgotten that the hands she dismissed so casually held every secret her company possessed, and now those hands were gone, and everything they had built was crumbling. By noon, the client cancellations had reached 23. 3 major partners had issued formal statements distancing themselves from Tang Yue Tech. The legal department estimated potential liability exceeding 500 million yuan. The stock had fallen another 12% since the market opened. Shen Ruotang sat alone in her office with the blinds drawn. The shattered phone was still on the floor. The resignation letter was crumpled in her fist. She looked at the city through the window. Somewhere out there, Lu Yanzhou was watching this unfold. She knew it. He was somewhere in this city, probably smiling that quiet smile she had never bothered to notice, while her empire burned to the ground. She reached for her assistant's phone and dialed a number she had memorized years ago and never once used. It didn't go through. The man who had always been there, always waiting, always invisible, had finally made himself impossible to find. And for the first time, Shen Ruotang understood exactly how much she had lost. By 2 in the afternoon, the situation inside Tang Yue Tech had moved past chaos and into something closer to a funeral. The operations room, once a showcase of gleaming monitors and real-time performance dashboards, now looked like a war room after a losing battle. Empty coffee cups covered every surface. Ties were loosened. Sleeves were rolled up. People spoke in hushed, hurried voices, the kind reserved for hospitals and disaster zones.
Shen Ruotang hadn't eaten since the night before.
Her hair, usually immaculate, was pulled back in a messy knot. Her designer blouse had a coffee stain near the collar.
She didn't notice.
She couldn't notice. Her entire world had narrowed to a single problem that refused to be solved. Chen Wei stood before her in the conference room with a tablet in his trembling hands. His face was the color of old milk. He said, "Ms.
Shen, the preliminary assessment is complete.
The damage is worse than we thought." Shen Ruotang said, "Just tell me the numbers." Chen Wei swallowed hard. He said, 43 client systems are completely non-functional. Another 12 are experiencing cascading failures. Our billing infrastructure is down, which means we can't process payments, which means we can't generate revenue, which means we're bleeding out on the table, Shen Ruotang said. "I understand basic math. What about recovery?" Chen Wei looked at his tablet, then at the floor, then at the wall, anywhere but at her face. He said, "We brought in an external forensic team from Hangin Digital. They spent 4 hours on the servers. Their lead engineer just sent me a preliminary report." He handed her the tablet. The screen displayed a dense technical document stamped with the words confidential and argent in red. Shen Ruotang scrolled through pages of jargon she didn't fully understand until she reached the executive summary at the bottom. Her blood stopped moving. The summary read, "The core architecture overwrite was executed with root-level privileges requiring biometric authentication. Security logs indicate the authentication fingerprint belonged to the system's original architect. No other personnel on record possess the authorization level necessary to perform this operation. The architecture employs a proprietary encryption layer that our team cannot bypass. Without the original architect's credentials, full recovery is impossible within any commercially viable timeframe. The original architect, Lu Yanzhou, her husband. Every piece of the nebulous system, every server, every backup, every redundant failsafe, had been designed with a lock that only one key could open.
His key.
his fingerprint. She had never bothered to demand a second key because she had never imagined a scenario where he would use the first one against her. She had been wrong about that.
She had been wrong about everything.
Shen Ruotang set the tablet down carefully. The way you handle something that might explode.
She said, so what you're telling me is that the entire company, everything we've built, every contract we hold, every yuan in our accounts, depends on a man who is currently not answering his phone. Chen Wei said, yes, and no one else can fix this.
No, Ms.
Shen.
The encryption layer he built is...
It's not standard. It's custom. The forensic team said they've never seen anything like it. It would take months to reverse engineer, and by then, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. By then, there would be no company left to save. The conference room door burst open. Lin Yao, the client services manager, rushed in with her phone still pressed to her ear. Her eyes were wide and red-rimmed. She said, Ms. Shen, Ruifeng Group just issued a press release. They're terminating their contract and filing a lawsuit for breach of contract. They're demanding compensation of 120 million yuan. The number hung in the air like smoke. Additionally, Lin Yao continued, her voice cracking. 7 more clients have joined the class action. The legal department estimates total liability exposure at over 400 million. And the stock. The stock, Shen Ruotang repeated, her voice flat. It hit the circuit breaker 10 minutes ago. Trading has been suspended. When it resumes tomorrow morning, the analysts are predicting a 50% drop.
At minimum.
50%. Tang Yue Tech had been valued at over 3 billion yuan 3 months ago. A 50% drop meant 1.5 billion erased from the market. Investors would revolt. The board would call for her head. Everything she had spent 4 years building, everything she had sacrificed her marriage for, everything she had chosen over Lu Yanzhou, was sliding into an abyss. And the only rope was held by the man she had handed toilet paper to. Shen Ruotang walked to the window and looked down at the city below. The streets were busy. Cars moved. People walked. The world continued spinning while her empire crumbled floor by floor.
She said, find him.
Lin Yao said, we've tried. His phone is disconnected. The apartment is empty. His social media accounts have been deleted. It's like he vanished. Shen Ruotang turned from the window. Her expression was no longer frightened. It was angry. The kind of anger that sharpens everything it touches. She said, I don't care what it costs.
Hire investigators.
Contact his old classmates, his former colleagues, anyone who might know where he is. Check every cheap motel and rental property in the city. I want him found before the market opens tomorrow. Lin Yao nodded and rushed out. Chen Wei lingered by the door, still holding his useless tablet like a shield. He said quietly, Miss
Shen, if I may ask, what will you do when you find him?
Shen Ruotang didn't answer right away. She looked at the shattered phone still lying in the corner of her office, at the resignation letter crumpled on her desk, at the wedding photo her assistant had retrieved from the apartment and brought to her that morning. The sticky note was still on it. 2 words.
No more.
She said, whatever I have to do. The afternoon bled into evening. The office emptied slowly as exhausted employees trickled out. By 7, only the crisis team remained, huddled in the operations room while the big screens continued to display red error messages.
Shen Ruotang sat in her office with the door closed.
She had tried calling Lu Yanzhou's number 17 times. Each time, the same robotic voice informed her the number was no longer in service. She had sent emails that bounced back from a deactivated address. She had even tried messaging him on an old chat app they used during the early days of their marriage. The account had been deleted. At 8:15, her personal phone rang.
The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize.
She snatched it up. She said, Yanzhou? A man's voice, low and familiar in the worst possible way, replied, not quite. But we need to talk. It was him, the man from the Porsche. The one with the easy smile and the expensive taste in champagne. The one she had spent 20,000 yuan on while her husband wrote code alone in a cubicle. Shen Ruotang's voice dropped to ice. She said, now is not a good time. The man laughed. It was a careless, comfortable sound, the laugh of someone who had no idea the ground beneath him was about to crack. He said, I saw the news.
Rough day.
Listen, I'm at the peninsula, same suite. Come over. I'll order champagne. You can relax for a couple hours before you go back to saving the world. Before she could respond, he added, oh, and bring the black card.
I want to upgrade to the presidential suite tonight.
The view is supposed to be incredible.
The black card, the Tang Yue Tech corporate elite card. The one connected directly to the company's main operating account. The one she had been swiping for months to pay for hotel rooms and champagne and designer gifts for a man who was now asking her to upgrade to a nicer room while her company bled to death.
She said, I can't.
The accounts are frozen. The board locked everything down this afternoon. There was a pause. When the man spoke again, his voice had lost its warmth. It was flat.
Businesslike.
The voice of someone recalculating the value of an investment.
He said, frozen.
All of them?
All of them, Shen Ruotang said. I don't have access to anything right now.
The auditors are coming tomorrow.
Everything is under review.
The pause stretched longer this time. Shen Ruotang could hear breathing on the other end, slow and measured. Then the man said, I see.
Well,
call me when things are sorted out.
The line went dead. Shen Ruotang stared at the phone in her hand. In 3 years of marriage, Lu Yanzhou had never hung up on her.
Not once.
Not even when she deserved it. And this man she had risked everything for, had just disconnected the call the moment her money stopped flowing.
She didn't have time to process that.
Because at that exact moment, her assistant knocked on the door and stepped inside with a piece of paper in her hand. The assistant said, Ms.
Shen, the investigators found an address.
Shen Ruotang stood up so fast, her chair slammed into the wall behind her.
She said, where?
The assistant hesitated.
She said, it's in the old industrial district.
A rental building on Gansu Road.
6th floor.
No elevator.
Shen Ruotang grabbed her coat and headed for the door. The address was 20 minutes away. She would be there before 9. In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Her hair was a mess.
Her makeup was smeared.
Her eyes were red from staring at screens all day. She looked nothing like the poised CEO who had thrown toilet paper at her husband 3 days earlier. But she didn't care about any of that. The only thing that mattered was finding Lu Yanzhou and making him fix what he had broken. She would apologize if she had to. She would beg. She would offer him anything he wanted. Money. Equity. Whatever price he named, she would pay it. Because without him, Tang Yue Tech was dead. And without Tang Yue Tech, Shen Ruotang was nothing. She just didn't know yet that the price Lu Yanzhou would demand was something she couldn't afford to lose.
Her pride.
The building on Gansu Road looked like it had been constructed before building codes existed. The exterior was gray concrete stained by decades of rain and exhaust fumes. Most of the streetlights on the block were broken. The ones that still worked flickered orange, throwing unsteady shadows across the cracked pavement. Shen Ruotang's Porsche looked absurdly out of place parked next to a row of rusted bicycles and a dumpster that hadn't been emptied in weeks. She stepped out in her heels and immediately sank an inch into a puddle of questionable origin.
She didn't care.
She yanked her foot free and marched toward the entrance. There was no lobby, just a narrow stairwell with a bare bulb hanging from a wire. The walls were covered in peeling paint and decades of graffiti. Something scurried in the corner as she climbed. She didn't look down. By the time she reached the 6th floor, her legs were burning and her breath was short. The staircase opened onto a long corridor with doors on either side. Each door was identical, cheap wood with a brass number screwed into the center. At the far end, number 612 had a thin line of light visible under the frame. She walked toward it. Her heels echoed in the empty hallway. When she reached the door, she stopped and raised her hand to knock. The door opened before she could touch it. Lu Yanzhou stood in the doorway wearing jeans and a plain gray t-shirt.
He was barefoot.
His hair was longer than she remembered, falling slightly over his forehead. He looked thinner, or maybe she had just never really looked at him before. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed and an expression she had never seen on his face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something far worse. It was indifference. He said, "Took you longer than I expected. I thought you'd be here by noon." Shen Ruotang had rehearsed a dozen different approaches during the drive. She had planned to be firm, authoritative, the CEO demanding answers from a rogue employee. She had planned to be conciliatory, the wife reaching out to a wounded husband. She had planned to be cold, to remind him of legal consequences, to threaten him with lawsuits. But standing in front of him now, in this dingy hallway that smelled like mildew and fried food, every prepared word fell out of her head and shattered on the floor.
She said, Yanzhou,
"Please, come back." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hadn't meant for it to. It just did.
Lu Yanzhou didn't move.
He looked at her, the way you look at a TV commercial that you've already seen 100 times. Mildly bored.
Completely unmoved.
He said, "Come back to what, exactly? To the cubicle where I sleep under a desk while you drink champagne at the peninsula? To the apartment where I live like a tenant who doesn't pay rent? To the wife who hands me toilet paper in front of 300 people and calls it a bonus?" Shen Ruotang said, "I was wrong."
I know I was wrong.
The way I treated you. It was unforgivable.
I see that now.
But the company, Yanzhou, the company is going to die if you don't come back.
Everything we built together.
Everything you worked for.
Lu Yanzhou tilted his head slightly.
A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth.
He said, everything I worked for.
That's interesting.
Because I seem to remember building all of it.
And I seem to remember you taking all the credit. And I seem to remember you telling another man that I was pathetic while you waved my money in his face.
So tell me, Ruotang.
What exactly is in this for me?
She had no answer. They both knew it. The smile on his face faded. What replaced it was something harder, something that had been forged over years of neglect and disrespect, hammered into shape in a single night while 2 rolls of toilet paper sat on a desk. He said, I gave you 4 years of my life. 4 years of 14-hour days and missed dinners and birthdays I spent alone in a server room.
I built your company from the ground up, while you called me useless in front of your friends.
I made you 200 million yuan last year alone, and you gave me 5,000 a month like I was a charity case.
You took the money I earned and spent it on hotel rooms with another man.
You laughed about it.
I have the video on my phone. Shen Ruotang's face went white.
The video...
The parking garage.
She had completely forgotten about the cracked window.
Lu Yanzhou continued, his voice calm and even, like he was reading from a report.
So Harry's how this is going to work.
I'm not coming back to Tangyue Tech. Not as an employee.
Not ever.
But I will restore the systems. I will call off the disaster. I will save your company from the hole you've dug yourself into. Shen Ruotang felt a flicker of hope in her chest. She said, what do you want?
Money?
How much?
I'll give you anything.
Lu Yanzhou looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and gestured toward the tiny apartment behind him. He said, come inside.
Let's talk terms.
The studio was small but clean. A mattress on the floor. A single desk with 3 monitors set up. A kitchenette with a hot plate and a mini fridge. It was smaller than the walk-in closet in Shen Ruotang's apartment. It was smaller than her office bathroom. Lu Yanzhou sat down on the only chair and left her standing in the middle of the room. There was nowhere else to sit except the floor.
He said, 3 conditions.
You meet all 3 and I restore everything.
You refuse any one of them, and you can watch your company burn from the sidewalk.
Do you understand?
Shen Ruotang nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. Lu Yanzhou held up one finger.
Condition 1.
You sign over full ownership of the apartment in the financial district to me, effective immediately. I paid for it. I'm taking it back.
Shen Ruotang said done.
He held up a second finger.
Condition 2.
You will issue a public statement admitting that I was the original architect of the Nebula system. No more hiding me in a back office while you take bows on stage. The entire industry will know who built your company and who destroyed it. Shen Ruotang's pride screamed in protest.
A public admission would humiliate her.
It would tell every competitor, every investor, every client that she had been lying about her technical expertise for years. But Tangyue Tech was dying. Pride could be sacrificed.
She said, fine.
Done.
What's the third condition?
Lu Yanzhou lowered his hand. He leaned back in his chair and looked up at her with an expression that was completely unreadable. He said, Condition 3.
You kneel?
Right here. Right now. On this floor.
And you apologize.
Not to the CEO of Tangyue Tech. To me. To the man you married and then treated like garbage.
You kneel and you say the words and you mean them.
Or, this conversation is over.
The room went silent. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the drip of the faucet in the kitchenette.
Shen Ruotang stood frozen.
Every instinct she had screamed at her to refuse. She was Shen Ruotang. She was the CEO of a multi-billion yuan company. She had been on magazine covers. She had given keynote speeches at industry conferences. She did not kneel.
Not to anyone.
Not ever. But the company was dying. The lawsuits were piling up. The board was circling. The stock was in free fall. And the only man who could stop any of it was sitting in a cheap chair in a cheap apartment, waiting for her to make a choice. Lu Yanzhou watched her without speaking. He didn't rush her. He didn't repeat the demand. He just waited, the same way she had made him wait for respect that never came.
30 seconds passed.
Then a minute.
Then Shen Ruotang, CEO of Tangyue Tech, wife of the man she had mocked and betrayed and discarded, lowered herself to her knees on the cold concrete floor of a studio apartment in the worst part of the city. Her designer trousers pressed into the dusty ground. Her knees ached almost immediately. She looked up at Lu Yanzhou, and for the first time in 4 years, she saw him clearly. Not as a tool, not as a convenience.
Not as a joke.
As a man.
She opened her mouth. The words came out slowly, painfully, like stones dragged up from a deep well.
She said, Yanzhou, I'm sorry.
For everything.
For the way I treated you?
For the things I said. For the man For what I did. You deserved better than me. You deserved someone who saw what you were worth.
I didn't.
And am sorry. Tears were running down her cheeks now. She hadn't planned on crying. She hadn't cried in years. But her body had apparently decided that tonight was the night to empty every reservoir she had been filling since the day she first looked at Lu Yanzhou and saw a convenience instead of a husband. Lu Yanzhou looked down at her. His face didn't change. There was no satisfaction in his expression.
No triumph.
Just a deep, quiet weariness. He said, "Get up. I'll restore the systems tonight." Shen Ruotang scrambled to her feet. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing what was left of her makeup. She said, "Thank you. Yanzhou, thank you. I swear, things will be different. We can." Lu Yanzhou stood up and cut her off with a raised hand. He said, "Don't.
We're not getting back together?
We're not starting over. This isn't a reconciliation. This is a transaction.
You met my terms?
I'll meet yours."
That's all.
He walked to the door and opened it.
The corridor outside was still dark and empty.
He said, "The systems will be operational by 6 in the morning. You'll have the apartment papers delivered to me by noon, and that public statement needs to go out before the market opens.
I'll be watching."
Shen Ruotang walked past him into the hallway. She paused and looked back. His face was still that same mask of indifference. She realized with a cold, sinking certainty that she was looking at a stranger. The man she had married no longer existed. She had killed him, slowly, over 4 years, and the person standing in the doorway was whatever had grown back in his place. She opened her mouth to say something else.
She didn't know what.
Maybe another apology?
Maybe a plea. Lu Yanzhou closed the door before she could decide. She stood in the hallway for a long time, alone, the bare bulb buzzing overhead. From somewhere behind the door, she could hear the soft clack of a keyboard. He had already moved on. He was already working. The transaction had already begun. Shen Ruotang walked down the 6 flights of stairs in the dark. When she reached her Porsche, she sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes without starting the engine.
Her knees were dirty.
Her face was streaked with tears. Her company was still on the brink of collapse. But all she could think about was the look in Lu Yanzhou's eyes when he had opened the door.
Not anger.
Not hatred.
Nothing. He had looked at her the way she had looked at him for years, like she didn't matter at all. And that, she realized, hurt far worse than kneeling ever could. At 6 in the morning, the Tangyue Tech servers came back online. The red error messages that had dominated every screen for more than 24 hours blinked out, replaced by the familiar green status indicators that meant revenue was flowing again.
Chen Wei called it a miracle.
The exhausted engineers in the operations room broke into applause, some of them crying, most of them too tired to do anything but slump in their chairs and stare at the monitors like they were watching a loved one wake from a coma. Shen Ruotang watched the screens from her office doorway. She had not slept.
She had not eaten.
She had driven straight from that dingy apartment on Gansu Road back to headquarters and spent the rest of the night coordinating with her crisis team. The public statement had been drafted and released at 5 in the morning, a carefully worded press release that acknowledged Lu Yanzhou as the original architect of the Tangyue Nebula system and expressed deep gratitude for his foundational contributions. It did not mention the toilet paper. It did not mention the kneeling.
But it was enough.
The industry saw it. The investors saw it. The stock, when the market opened at 9, stabilized. By 10, the first clients had confirmed their contracts would not be terminated. By 11, Rui Feng Group agreed to resume negotiations, though their legal team made it clear that damages were still on the table. By noon, the immediate crisis had passed. Tangyue Tech was battered, bleeding, humiliated, but alive. Shen Ruotang sat at her desk and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds of relief. Then her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she had not seen since the previous evening. The man from the peninsula, the one who had hung up on her when the money stopped flowing. She answered and said, "What do you want?" His voice was different this time. No charm.
No easy laughter.
Just a cold, clipped urgency that made her stomach tighten. He said, "I need you to listen very carefully. Your corporate accounts were unfrozen this morning. I need you to transfer funds to an account I'm about to give you. Immediately."
Shen Ruotang said, "Excuse me."
"The accounts are under board supervision right now. Every transaction is being monitored. I can't just move money around, because you ask nicely." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. He said, "This isn't about asking nicely, Ruotang.
This is about leverage.
Do you remember the peninsula?
Do you remember the conversations we had in that suite?
The things you said about your husband?
About your board? About the creative accounting you used to hide company losses last year? I recorded all of it. Every word. Every confession. The blood drained from Shen Ruotang's face. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles cracked. She said, "You're lying."
I don't lie about money, he said.
"I have 18 hours of audio. Conversations spanning 6 months. Do you know how much a journalist would pay for a recording of Tang Yue Tech CEO admitting to financial fraud? Do you know how fast your board would vote you out if those recordings surfaced?
So Harry's the deal.
Transfer 30 million yuan to the account number. I'm about to text you.
Do it within the hour.
Or every newsroom in this city gets a copy."
30 million.
The number echoed in her skull. The company's operating account currently held approximately 45 million. After the lawsuits and the settlements and the client compensation packages, that was barely enough to keep the lights on for another quarter. Taking out 30 million would leave them with fumes. Shen Ruotang said, "I can't. The board has to approve any transfer over 5 million. There are procedures."
Audits! I can't just you're the CEO, he cut in.
"You have emergency authorization protocols. You used them to pay for our suite last month. Use them again.
Figure it out!
You have 1 hour." The line went dead. A moment later, her phone buzzed with a text message containing a string of numbers and the name of an offshore bank she didn't recognize. Shen Ruotang stared at the phone. Her hands were shaking. This was her fault.
All of it.
The affair, the recordings, the careless words spoken over champagne in a hotel room she had paid for with company money.
She had handed this man everything he needed to destroy her, and now he was cashing. She had two choices.
Refuse to pay and watch those recordings destroy what little remained of her reputation and her career. Or pay and drain the company's accounts to a level that would be nearly impossible to explain to the board. She chose the option that seemed survivable in the moment. She authorized the transfer. The money moved at 11:47 in the morning. 30 million yuan, siphoned from Tang Yue Tech's main operating account to a numbered account in a jurisdiction with no extradition treaty. The confirmation email arrived in her inbox with a cheerful little ding. She sat back in her chair and waited for the recordings to be destroyed. She waited for the man to call back and confirm that the deal was done. She waited for the nightmare to end. The phone didn't ring. At noon, she called the number. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Same result. She sent a text message asking for confirmation that the recordings had been deleted.
No response.
At 12:30, her assistant knocked on the door with a face as gray as ash. The assistant said, "Miss
Shen, the finance department just flagged an unauthorized transfer.
30 million yuan. They're asking for your approval to freeze all outgoing transactions and initiate an internal investigation." Shen Ruotang said, "I authorized the transfer. It was an emergency supplier payment." The assistant hesitated. Then she said quietly, "Ms. Shen, the account the money went to has been flagged by our bank's fraud detection system. It's associated with a known shell company operating out of the Cayman Islands. The bank is asking if we want to file a fraud report with the authorities." The room tilted. Shen Ruotang gripped the edge of her desk. She said, "File the report. Now." But she already knew it was too late. The money was gone. 30 million yuan, vanished into a black hole of shell companies and offshore accounts. The man from the peninsula had played her perfectly. He had waited for the exact moment when her company was weakest, when her judgment was most compromised, when she was so desperate to protect what remained that she would do something catastrophically stupid. And she had. By 2 in the afternoon, the board had been notified. An emergency meeting was called for the following morning. The word embezzlement was being whispered in corridors. The legal department began preparing documents for a criminal referral. Shen Ruotang's phone filled with messages from directors demanding explanations she couldn't give. She sat alone in her office with the blinds drawn and the lights off. The city outside glittered in the afternoon sun, indifferent to her collapse. The company she had built, the empire she had sacrificed everything for, was now balanced on a knife's edge. The clients were back, but the trust was gone. The systems were running, but the accounts were hemorrhaging. The board was still on her side, but that would change at tomorrow's meeting when they learned she had transferred 30 million yuan to a known fraudster without authorization. And somewhere across the city, Lu Yanzhou was probably watching all of this unfold from that tiny studio apartment, sitting in his cheap chair with his 3 monitors glowing, seeing every headline, every stock tick, every crack, spreading through the foundation of the life she had stolen from him. She picked up her phone and dialed his new number, the one he had provided in the restoration instructions. It rang 3 times before he answered.
She said, "Yanzhou,
I need your help."
There was a pause. Then his voice, calm and completely unsurprised, said, "No, you don't. You need someone to clean up your mess. I'm not that person anymore." "Please," she said. "He took everything. The accounts are empty. The board is going to remove me tomorrow. I don't know what to do.
Another pause.
Longer this time. Then Lu Yanzhou said, the money you transferred this morning, was it the same card?
The one you showed him in the car that night?
Shen Ruotang closed her eyes. Of course he knew about the transfer. Of course he was tracking everything. He had probably seen the money move in real time. Another data point in the slow-motion disaster he had predicted from the beginning. She said, yes.
Lu Yanzhou said, then it'd say he gave you exactly what you gave me.
Nothing.
The line went dead. Shen Ruotang sat in the dark office with the silent phone pressed to her ear and listened to the sound of her empire crumbling one brick at a time. The recordings were still out there. The money was gone. The board was circling, and the only person who could have saved her had just hung up without saying goodbye. Tomorrow the board would meet. Tomorrow, everything would end. She knew it with a certainty that settled into her bones like cold water.
What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have imagined, was that Lu Yanzhou's next move was already in motion.
And it wasn't about saving her company. It was about replacing it. 1 month passed. The leaves on the trees lining the financial district turned yellow and began to fall. Summer bled into autumn, and the city's attention span, always short, moved on to fresher disasters. The Tang Yue tech scandal faded from headlines. New stories replaced it. The world forgot. But the industry did not forget. In a glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor of the Tengfei Technology Tower, I stood before a crowd of 200 people and tried to remember the last time anyone had applauded for me.
The answer I realized was never.
Not once in 4 years at Tang Yue Tech had anyone clapped for Lu Yanzhou. They had clapped while I was handed toilet paper. They had clapped when Shen Ruotang called me pathetic. But never for me. Today was different. The screen behind me displayed a live demo of a product we called Aurora. It was everything Nebula had been and everything it had failed to become.
Faster processing speeds.
Adaptive security architecture that learned and evolved in real time. A user interface so intuitive that a client could onboard in hours instead of weeks. It was built on the same foundational code I had written for Tang Yue Tech. But I had spent the past month refining it, expanding it, turning a powerful system into an unstoppable one. The first day sales numbers flashed on the screen. The room gasped before the applause even started. 320 million yuan. In one day, more than Tang Yue Tech had made in an entire year. I stepped away from the podium as the room erupted. Hands reached out to shake mine. Business cards were pressed into my palm. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the back, a reporter was already filing a story with a headline that would break the internet by evening. Tengfei Aurora shatters industry records. Former Tang Yue architect leads the disruption. Tengfei Technology had been Tang Yue's largest competitor for years. A company Shen Ruotang had dismissed as second-rate in board meetings and investor calls. She had been wrong about that too. Tengfei had resources Tang Yue could only dream of, manufacturing partnerships across 12 countries. Distribution networks reaching markets Tang Yue had never touched. A research division with more PhDs than most universities. Everything they lacked was what I brought to the table.
Core technology.
A product that made theirs look obsolete. The CEO of Tengfei, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s named Zhao Mingyuan, found me after the presentation. He shook my hand with a grip that was firm and genuine. Zhao Mingyuan said 320 million in 24 hours. Do you know what the previous industry record was? I said 180 million, set by Tang Yue Tech 2 years ago. He smiled.
You just nearly doubled it.
How does that feel?
I thought about it. I thought about the 2 rolls of toilet paper.
I thought about the parking garage.
I thought about Shen Ruotang on her knees in my studio apartment, tears cutting tracks through her makeup. I said, it feels like a start. The news reached Shen Ruotang within the hour. It reached her because she was still the CEO of Tang Yue Tech, at least on paper. The board had voted to remove her 3 weeks earlier, but the legal process was dragging. There were contracts to unwind, severance packages to negotiate, lawsuits from shareholders who wanted her personally liable for the 30 million yuan she had transferred to a fraudster. She was a CEO in name only, a ghost haunting an office that no longer belonged to her. She sat in that office now, watching the Tengfei product launch on her computer screen. The video showed me walking across the stage. The audio picked up the applause. The ticker at the bottom of the screen displayed the sales numbers in real time.
320 million.
The number sat in her chest like a stone. Her assistant knocked and entered without waiting for permission. The formality of the office had eroded over the past month. Everyone knew Shen Ruotang was leaving.
No one knew exactly when.
The respect that had once surrounded her had thinned to a transparent film. The assistant said, Ms. Shen, the financial audit is complete. The total shortfall is 180 million yuan. That includes the 30 million transfer, the client compensation packages, the legal settlements, and the lost revenue from the outage. The board has scheduled a final vote for Friday. They're moving to declare bankruptcy. Shen Ruotang didn't look away from the screen. She watched me shake hands with Zhao Mingyuan. She watched the Tengfei employees crowd around me, like I was a returning hero. She watched the man she had thrown toilet paper at become the most talked about name in the industry. She said quietly, "How long until the announcement goes public?" "Friday evening," the assistant said. "The board wants to wait until the markets close. They're hoping to minimize the final stock crash." The final stock crash, Tang Yue Tech's shares had already fallen 83% from their peak. The company that had been worth 3 billion yuan 4 months ago was now valued at less than 500 million, and most of that was tied up in office furniture and server hardware that was already obsolete. The Nebula system, once the crown jewel of the company's intellectual property, was now worthless. My new Aurora system had made sure of that. Shen Ruotang closed her laptop. She looked around her office. The leather chair, the jasmine diffuser, the awards on the shelf, all of it would be gone by Monday.
The bankruptcy trustees would inventory everything.
The creditors would pick the bones clean. And she would walk out of this building with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a reputation so thoroughly destroyed that no company in the industry would ever hire her again. She stood up and walked to the window. The city spread out below her, the same view she had admired for years from the same spot. But the view felt different now. Smaller. Like she was looking at a world she was no longer part of. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. She looked at the screen. Tang Yue Tech files for bankruptcy protection. Former industry giant collapses after month of scandals. The article was already live. Someone had leaked the story before the board's Friday deadline. Probably one of the directors, probably someone who wanted to distance themselves from her as quickly as possible. The comment section was already filling up with posts from former clients, former employees, strangers who had watched the drama unfold from a distance. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving CEO. I worked there for 2 years.
She was awful.
Lu Yanzhou is a legend. He destroyed his own creation and built something better.
Shen Ruotang set the phone down.
She didn't read the rest. She didn't need to. She knew what the world thought of her now. The arrogant CEO who cheated on her husband and paid for it with bankruptcy. The woman who had everything and threw it away for hotel rooms and champagne. The cautionary tale that business schools would teach for years. And the man she had betrayed was now standing on a stage 40 floors above her, collecting applause and sales records while her empire crumbled to dust. She walked out of her office for the last time. The corridor was quiet. Most of the staff had already been laid off. The few who remained were packing boxes and updating resumes. No one looked up when she passed.
No one said goodbye.
The elevator doors closed behind her, and the mirrored walls showed her reflection. She looked older than she had 4 months ago.
Thinner.
Diminished. The confident woman who had thrown toilet paper at her husband was gone. What remained was a hollow shell, dressed in designer clothes she could no longer afford, carrying a handbag that would be sold within the week. The elevator descended, the doors opened onto the lobby. She walked out into the autumn afternoon, and the glass doors of Tang Yue Tech swung shut behind her with a soft, final click. Somewhere 40 floors above her, on the other side of the city, the celebration at Tengfei Technology was still going. The champagne was flowing.
The contracts were being signed.
The future was being written by a man who had spent 4 years in the shadows and was finally standing in the sun. I stood by the window in Zhao Mingyuan's corner office, looking out at the skyline. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I glanced at the screen. Tang Yue Tech files for bankruptcy protection. I read the headline once, then again. Then I set the phone face down on the windowsill. Zhao Mingyuan appeared beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. He handed me one and said, "Everything all right?" I said, "Everything is perfect." We clinked glasses, and I turned back to the window. Somewhere in the grid of streets below, Shen Ruotang was walking away from the wreckage of her life. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pity. I felt something simpler than both. I felt done. 4 years of humiliation. 4 years of neglect. 4 years of giving everything I had to someone who treated me like nothing. And now the score was settled, not with revenge.
Not with anger.
With something far more permanent, success. I had not just destroyed her company.
I had made it irrelevant.
I had not just walked away. I had walked up. And everyone in this city, everyone in this industry knew exactly who had built what and who had torn it down. The champagne was cold. The view was breathtaking. And somewhere in the distance, a woman who had once been my wife was learning that some debts can't be paid with apologies. Some debts can only be paid with everything you have. 2 months after Tengfei Aurora launched, the industry had reshaped itself around a new center of gravity, and that center was me. The product had surpassed 400 million in total sales by the end of the second month. International clients who had never looked twice at domestic enterprise software were suddenly flying in for demos. Zhao Mingyuan had promoted me to chief technology officer without a single board member objecting. My face appeared on the cover of 2 business magazines, and the photo they used was the same one Shen Ruotang had cropped me out of 3 years earlier. They ran it full frame this time. I had moved back into the financial district apartment on the 15th floor, the one she had signed over to me. I had repainted the walls. I had thrown out the furniture she chose. I had taken down the wedding photo and replaced it with a framed copy of the Aurora launch day sales report. The number 320 million was printed in bold red ink. It looked better than any wedding picture ever had. On a Thursday evening in late November, I left the Tengfei Tower later than usual. The rain had started around 5 and had not let up. By 8, the streets were rivers and the gutters were overflowing. I pulled my new car, a black Mercedes S-Class that still smelled like leather from the factory, out of the underground garage and turned onto the main road. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm. The radio played something soft and instrumental. I was thinking about the next Aurora update, a machine learning module that would push us even further ahead of the competition, when my headlights caught a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. The Mercedes stopped 10 feet short of impact. Rain hammered the roof like fists.
The figure didn't move.
She just stood there, arms at her sides, soaked through to the bone, her hair plastered to her face in wet strands. The headlights lit her up like a stage spotlight. It was Shen Ruotang. She looked nothing like the woman who had thrown toilet paper at me a lifetime ago. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a thin beige trench coat that had seen better decades. Her shoes were flat and scuffed. Her face was bare of makeup, pale and hollow, the cheekbones too sharp. She had lost weight. A lot of it. Her eyes, once sharp enough to cut glass, were now red-rimmed and swollen. Behind her, at the edge of the curb, a man I didn't recognize was holding up a phone. The screen was lit.
The little red recording light was on. He was streaming.
I sat in the car for a long moment, the engine humming, the wipers sweeping. Then I stepped out into the rain. The cold hit me instantly. Water soaked through my suit jacket in seconds.
I didn't care.
I walked around the front of the Mercedes until I was standing 5 feet from her, close enough to see the way she was shivering, close enough to hear her teeth chatter. Shen Ruotang looked up at me. Rain ran down her face like tears, but the tears were real too. I could see them mixing with the water, salt and sky falling together. She said, "Yanzhou, please." Her voice was hoarse, scraped raw by cold and desperation. It was the voice of someone who had been screaming into a void and was down to her last breath. I said, "What are you doing here?" She took a shaky step forward. I didn't move. She stopped, swaying slightly, like her legs might give out at any moment. She said, "I have nothing. The company is gone. The bankruptcy court took the apartment.
They took the cars.
They took everything.
My bank accounts are frozen.
The lawsuits are still going.
The shareholders are suing me personally. I owe 140 million yuan in civil damages. I will never in my entire life be able to pay that back." She paused, swallowing hard. The rain kept falling. The man with the phone kept filming. She said, "I've been sleeping on a friend's couch for 3 weeks. She told me yesterday I have to leave by the end of the month. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have no one."
The man I threw everything away for has gone.
He took the recordings and disappeared.
I don't even know if he's still in the country.
I stood in the rain and listened.
I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer comfort.
I just let the words fall, the same way I had let her insults fall for 4 years. She said, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything.
I know what I did.
I know what I was.
But Yanzhou, I am begging you.
Help me.
Give me a job!
Anything.
I'll work in the mailroom.
I'll answer phones.
I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Just please don't leave me out here with nothing." The rain pounded. The phone kept recording. The city lights blurred through the downpour like distant stars. I looked at Shen Ruotang, at the hollow cheeks and the trembling hands and the coat that was too thin for November, at the woman who had once stood on a stage and handed me toilet paper while 300 people laughed, at the woman who had spent my money on hotel rooms with another man and called me pathetic because I never fought back.
I said, "Is the live stream your idea?"
Her face went even paler, which I hadn't thought was possible. She glanced back at the man with the phone, then at me.
She said, I thought.
If people saw this, If they saw me apologize publicly, if they saw you forgive me,
Maybe it would help.
maybe the public opinion would shift. Maybe someone would give me a second chance. I almost laughed. Almost.
She wasn't here because she was sorry.
She was here because she had calculated the angles. Public humiliation in exchange for public sympathy. A live-streamed apology to soften the internet's hatred.
She was still playing the game.
Even now, soaked and broke and desperate, she was still trying to win.
I said, "You're not sorry."
You're just out of options. She flinched like I had slapped her.
Maybe I had, and the only way that mattered.
I said, the last time we stood in the rain together was the night of the year-end party. Do you remember that?
You were in your Porsche.
I was in my old sedan.
You drove to the Peninsula Hotel?
I drove home to an empty apartment. That night, you made a choice. You chose champagne and hotel rooms and a man who took 30 million yuan from you the second things got hard. You chose everything except me. And now you're standing in the rain asking me to save you from the consequences of your own choices. She said, her voice breaking. I know what I chose.
I know what I lost.
Please, Yanzhou.
In drowning, I looked at her for a long time. The rain dripped from my hair into my eyes. The phone kept recording. Somewhere on the internet, thousands of people were watching this unfold in real time. Comments scrolling past in an endless river of judgment. I said, you didn't come here to apologize. You came here to use me one last time.
You wanted the footage?
You wanted the redemption arc.
You wanted me to pull you out of the hole you dug so you could climb back up and pretend it never happened. She shook her head frantically.
No.
No, that's not. It is, I said. It's exactly what it is. And I'm not going to give it to you. I turned around and walked back to my car. The rain swallowed the sound of her voice as she called my name.
Once.
Twice.
3 times.
Each time weaker than the last. I opened the driver's door and paused. She was still standing there, a broken silhouette in the headlights, the rain pouring down around her, like a curtain closing on the final act of a play she had written herself. I said loud enough for her to hear, loud enough for the phone to pick up. You wanted to know what it felt like to be me. This is it. Standing in the cold while someone who has everything you need drives away.
Now you know.
I got in the car.
I closed the door. The engine purred as I shifted into gear. And then I did what she had done to me 100 times. I drove away without looking back. The rearview mirror showed her figure shrinking in the rain, growing smaller and smaller, until she was just another shadow in a city full of them. The man with the phone lowered his arm. The red recording light went dark. The live stream ended, and somewhere in the comment sections of whatever platform had hosted that broadcast, people were already writing the epitaph of Shen Ruotang's career. Some felt pity, some felt satisfaction, most felt nothing at all, because the internet moves fast and yesterday's villain is tomorrow's forgotten headline. But I knew one thing for certain as I drove through the rain-soaked streets toward the 15th floor apartment that had once been my cage and was now my castle. She would remember this night for the rest of her life. Not because of the rain, not because of the live stream, not because of the thousands of strangers who watched her humiliation. She would remember it because for the first time since she had met me, Lu Yanzhou had said no. And that single word, that small and final syllable, had cost her more than all the money she had ever stolen. It had cost her the last person in the world who might have cared. Spring came to the city the way it always did. Slowly at first, with hesitant warmth and patches of blue sky, and then all at once, like a floodgate opening, the trees along the financial district greened overnight. The cafes put their outdoor tables back on the sidewalks. The world, which had seemed frozen during the long winter months, began to move again.
6 months had passed since the night in the rain.
6 months since Shen Ruotang had stood in my headlights and begged for a second chance I was never going to give her. The live stream had gone viral, of course. 50 million views in the first week. The internet had dissected every frame, every word, every expression on her face. Some people called me cruel. Most called me justified. I didn't care what any of them thought. I had stopped caring about public opinion the night I walked out of Tang Yue Tech with 2 rolls of toilet paper in my coat pockets.
I kept one of those rolls.
It sat on a shelf in my office now, encased in a glass box like a museum artifact. Whenever new employees asked about it, I told them the truth. I told them it was a reminder that no matter how much you give, some people will only ever see your value in what they can take from you. The lesson usually stuck. Tangfei technology had grown beyond anything Zhao Mingyuan and I had projected. Aurora was now the dominant enterprise software platform in the domestic market, with a 38% share that grew every quarter. We had opened offices in Singapore, Tokyo, and London. Our international revenue had surpassed domestic revenue for the first time in March. The board had approved a stock buyback program. The analysts who once predicted our failure were now writing fawning profiles about our improbable rise. I had become, against all odds and certainly against all expectations, a respected man. Invitations to conferences. Speaking fees in the six figures.
A book deal from a major publisher who wanted me to write about disruption and resilience.
I turned down most of it. I wasn't interested in fame. I had seen what fame did to people. I had watched it turn Shen Ruotang into someone who confused cruelty with strength and manipulation with intelligence. I was interested in building things. Always had been. That was the part of me she had never understood. She had seen my code as a resource to extract, a product to sell, a means to an end. She had never seen it the way I saw it. As a craft, as an art, as the thing I was put on this earth to do. On a Tuesday afternoon in late April, I was in my corner office on the 42nd floor of the new Tangfei headquarters when my assistant buzzed in. The 42nd floor. 3 months earlier, I had been on the 40th. Growth had a way of pushing you upward. My assistant said, "Mr.
Lou, you have a visitor."
She doesn't have an appointment, but she said you would want to see her. I looked up from my monitor.
Who is it?
There was a pause. Then my assistant said quietly, "It's MS Shen Ruotang." I leaned back in my chair.
The leather creaked.
Outside the window, the city sprawled in all directions. A vast grid of glass and steel and millions of lives being lived in parallel. I said, "Send her." She walked through the door a moment later, and I barely recognized her. The transformation that had begun in the rain 6 months ago had continued, but not in the direction I would have expected. She was thinner still, but not in the hollow, desperate way she had been that night. She looked settled,
calmer.
She wore a simple gray dress, no designer labels, no jewelry except a thin silver chain around her neck. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face was clean of makeup, but her eyes were clear, not red-rimmed or swollen. She looked like someone who had stopped fighting and started accepting. She said, "Thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve it." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down carefully, like she was afraid the furniture might break. I said, "What do you want, Ruotang?"
She didn't flinch at the directness.
The old Shen Ruotang would have deflected, charmed, maneuvered. This one just nodded. She said, "I came to say goodbye. I'm leaving the city. I found a job in a small town about 400 kilometers from here. It's not much. Bookkeeping for a manufacturing plant, but it's honest work, and it's far enough away that no one recognizes my name." She paused, folding her hands in her lap. I waited.
She said, "The lawsuits are almost settled."
I'm going to be paying off the damages for the rest of my life. The plant job covers my basic expenses. The rest goes to the creditors.
He'll never be rich again.
He'll probably never own a home.
But I've made peace with that. I've made peace with a lot of things.
I said, "That doesn't sound like the Shen Ruotang I knew."
She smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that comes from looking at your past self and seeing a stranger. She said, "The Shen Ruotang you knew was a monster." I didn't realize it at the time.
Monsters never do.
I thought I was strong. I thought I was smart. I thought winning was the only thing that mattered, and anyone who didn't fight back deserved what they got. It took losing everything to understand that I wasn't strong. I was just cruel. And cruelty is the cheapest substitute for strength there is. She looked around the office, at the floor-to-ceiling windows, at the awards on the shelf, at the glass case with the single roll of toilet paper inside. She said I saw that in the magazine profile. They wrote about the toilet paper.
About what it represents.
I read that article and I couldn't stop crying.
Not because I was embarrassed.
Because I finally understood what I had done. I had taken a man who only ever wanted to build things and treated him like he was nothing. And then that man went out and built everything I had ever dreamed of, without me, while I destroyed myself. She stood up. The meeting was clearly over in her mind. She had said what she came to say.
She said, "I'm not here to ask for anything.
I'm not here to apologize again. I've apologized enough. Words don't fix what I broke. I just wanted to see you one last time, to tell you that I know
what I lost.
And I know it was my fault." She turned toward the door. I said, "Ruotang." She stopped and looked back.
I said, "The plant job."
"Is it what you want? Or is it just what you think you deserve?" She considered the question. The old Shen Ruotang would have had an answer ready. This one took her time. She said, "I don't know yet, but for the first time in my life, I'm not trying to be someone. I'm not. That's got to count for something." I nodded. She nodded back. Then she walked out of my office, and the door closed behind her with a soft click. I sat at my desk for a long time after she left. The sun moved across the sky. The shadows in the office lengthened. The city lights began to flicker on, one by one, a constellation born every evening. I thought about the night it all started. The year-end party.
The toilet paper.
The laughter. I thought about the parking garage and the fogged Porsche windows. I thought about the empty apartment and the resignation letter and the script I had written that erased 4 years of work in an instant.
I thought about revenge.
About how sweet it had tasted in the moment and how quickly the sweetness had faded. Revenge was a dish best served cold, the saying went. But no one talked about what came after the meal, the empty plate, the quiet kitchen, the realization that destroying your enemy doesn't fill the hole they left inside you. I had not forgiven Shen Ruotang.
I probably never would.
Forgiveness was for people who had moved on, and a part of me would always be standing on that stage, catching toilet paper while a room full of strangers laughed.
That part would never heal.
That part didn't need to heal. It just needed to be remembered. But I had done something better than forgive. I had built a life that didn't need her in it. A life that was full and rich and meaningful, not because of what I had taken from her, but because of what I had made for myself.
The Aurora platform.
The Tangfei partnership. The teams I had built and mentored. The young engineers who came to me for advice and left with confidence. The late nights in the lab when the code was flowing and the world outside ceased to exist. The quiet mornings in the 15th floor apartment. Sunlight streaming through windows I had cleaned myself. Coffee brewing in a kitchen I had finally learned to cook in. That was the victory, not the moment I drove away and left her in the rain. Not the bankruptcy headlines or the sales records or the magazine covers. The victory was waking up every morning in a life I had chosen, built by hands that had once only built for other people. I stood up and walked to the window. The city glittered below me, 42 floors down, a million lights and a million stories. Somewhere out there, a gray sedan was carrying Shen Ruotang toward a highway that led 400 kilometers away, toward a small town and a small job and a small life she had never imagined for herself. She would probably never be happy. But maybe, for the first time, she would be honest. And somewhere out there, in the same city but a different world, the man she had once called pathetic was standing in an office she could never have dreamed of, looking at a skyline she had once claimed as her own. I turned away from the window. On my desk, my computer screen displayed the latest Aurora metrics. The numbers were good.
They were always good now.
But they weren't the point anymore. They had never really been the point.
The point was the work.
The point was the building. The point was the life that kept growing. Day after day, long after the people who had tried to tear it down had faded into memory.
I sat down at my desk.
I opened a new file. I started writing code for the next version, the next update, the next impossible thing that no one believed could be done. Outside, the city kept spinning. The lights kept burning, and Lu Yanzhou, the man who had once been worth 2 rolls of toilet paper, kept building a world that would never stop turning. Not for her, not for anyone, for himself.